Okay, so I'm going to finish up the sustainable buildings discussion and focusing on LEED design and also the living building challenge. Okay, so here's a question. Let's say I'm interested in sustainability and I'm in the building industry, or I want to, I want to build a house, or I want to, move into a new building for my business. So how do I tell how quote unquote sustainable a building is? I mean, we've talked about all these different aspects of sustainability. How do I actually measure it? How do I compare the sustainability of one building to another building? So I want you to press pause and try to think about how you could actually do that. I mean, there are a lot of things you could possibly do. I mean, you could add solar panels. Is that an essential part of sustainability, or is that just a nice thing to have? Are you collecting your rainwater? Are you conserving water? Is that important? Is that essential? Are you growing your own food? Are you growing your own food organically? These are only a couple of the considerations, but if you think about all of the different elements that go into a building, there are almost limitless possibilities when it comes to adding things to a building. And we're going on beyond just the energy side of things with the bioclimatic buildings. We're looking at sustainability from a holistic perspective. I mean, are we being equitable? Are we, conserving resources for future generations and so forth? Okay, so if you think about it, how are you going to do this? Well, in sort of simplest terms, you just need a way to measure it. And so there are some sustainability rating systems, sustainability metrics, whatever you want to refer them to. And they must be a combination of things. In order for it to be sustainability, you can't look at it with a narrow lens and say, well, it has to be energy efficient, and that's all I care about. I mean, if you really want to be sustainable, then it has to be a combination of things. Okay, so the U.S. Green Building Council, you can see their symbol right over here. They are a nonprofit organization. That's a national organization, and they approach this very problem. They were thinking, okay, well, we care about sustainability. How do we actually measure how sustainable a building is? And so what they do is they came up with this system called Leadership in Energy Environmental Design, or LEED. You've probably heard of LEED design or LEED certification. And so LEED basically is this point-based rating system that indicates the sustainability of a building or neighborhood. And there's all kinds of different categories. So it's not just buildings, but it's primarily used for buildings. And it's a point-based system, so hopefully you watch the video. And so basically you get points for different sustainable characteristics like low water use, energy efficiency, native plants, your non-toxic materials. Are you promoting, low impact transportation? Are you being equitable? Are you using local materials? All this kind of stuff. Okay, so I'll show you a sheet here in a minute. Basically, you get to pick and choose, excuse me, which of these aspects of sustainability to utilize and in fact which to ignore. I mean, it's for LEED. Frankly, you're able to ignore certain categories if you want to, and there's different levels of certification, okay? And so basically what you do, and again, I'll show you a worksheet here in a minute, but you get points for different things, and you add up your points, and then you get a different level of certification. So there are 4 certification levels. You have your LEED certified, which is 40 to 49 points. So silver is 50 to 59, gold is 60 to 79, and then anything above 80 points is platinum. So you get points for different things, and they are meant to address different aspects of sustainability. And at the end of the day, you add up your points and they tell you what your certification is. Now, it's not like you're going in blind. They do have lead consultants that will say, you're basically consulting with them and they'll say, okay, well, here's how you can get your points for this and that and the other thing. So it's not, you could do it your own way if you wanted to, but usually you work with a lead person that knows how to get buildings certified, and they can help you identify, reasonable places to get points. Okay, so that's basically what LEED is. You can, if you want to click on, there's actually a link here to a video that might help you out, explain some of these. Okay, so that's the basics of LEED. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, but I'll leave these up here for you to explore if you want to. So there are all different categories. It's not just building, it's neighborhoods. You can look at operations and maintenance, new construction, and so forth. And these are how they break down their performance areas. Okay, so this is sort of supposed to address sustainability holistically. Okay, so these are important to keep in mind, the sustainable sites. So this is the surrounding area. Are they using water efficiently, energy and emissions, materials and resources? So that's like waste. And are they using local non-toxic materials? Indoor environmental quality. So is the air quality good because of chemicals or lack of chemicals? Is the building connected? Is it easy to get from one to the other? So, is it a long transportation route and so forth? Are you using your building for educational purposes? They give you points for that. Innovation and design, so they want it to be innovative, and then focusing on the local area. Now there are some pros and cons, but again, I'll leave that link for you to explore. But let's go ahead and look at this score. Okay, so here is a LEED for homes checklist, project checklist. And this just has all the different categories that we just went over: innovation and design, location, language, linkages, and so forth. So I'm not a LEED AP or expert or anything, but basically what you can do is you can check out to see if you think your building could get LEED certified. And you basically look at all these different categories, right? So do you have an integrated project team? If it's yes, then what you can do is you can click down this drop down. Okay, and there's your project points. So you notice my points went up here. So my final points went up from, if you keep an eye on this cell, so it goes from 0, and then if I get a point, right, it goes 1, and it also adds it to my category, so my innovation and design category. So I can go through here and I can click, on my points. I'm not going to go over all these in detail, but what you can see is that my total project number goes up, and it lists the certifications here, right? 45 is certified, silver is 60, 75 is gold, and 90 is platinum. So this has actually changed in the interim. Okay, so you can see I can get up to 3 points here for durability management, or whatever that is. And I'm just trying to get my points up. Sorry, this is kind of, let me, oh, there's a good one. So location linkages, so I can get 10 points for that. And let's just scroll down. I'll show you some of the elements. So you have sustainable sites, like do you have erosion control in place? Are you minimizing the disturbance? So let's get some points for that. Landscaping is sustainable landscaping. So you got all kinds of stuff. Non-toxic pest control. Am I rainwater harvesting? Yes. Okay, good. This is automated, so we can't check that one. Indoor water use, we have energy and atmosphere, so are we doing optimizing our energy performance? Okay, we got to do that one. Efficient water heating, materials and research. So there's all these different categories that you can do. And you can see it's a scorecard, right? So you can just get points for each thing, and then at the end you tally up all your points. So in this case I only had 18 points, so I don't get a certification level, but you can see how it works. So you can basically go through and check these boxes. So that's basically how it works without getting into too much detail. Okay, so that's the basic how LEED works. You get points for any number of things, and then you add up all the points, and at the end of the day you get your certification. Okay, so there are some, this is the video that was in your reading this week, or your lesson this week. There's another link here. Again, I'm not going to go through. These are videos that really help explain. This is a really good one, by the way. I recommend this if you want to see how the LEED process really works. It shows a designer go through with a LEED expert that kind of helps show you how they go after points and everything. Okay. So, you can go actually to the GBC. So this is a Delaware Valley Green Building Council. This is that happens to be in my neck of the woods, in the Mid-Atlantic region, Philadelphia, Greater Philadelphia area, basically. So you can see there's any number of ways. You can have this is a relatively small 5,000 square foot Science and Technology Center to a 132,000 square foot community college complex in Media, Pennsylvania. And if you click on this link, there's actually a live link here. And so again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you can actually investigate the different LEED categories here. So if I want to search for, now mind you, this is all in the Greater Philadelphia region, but let's say I just want to do all the LEED certified schools. So I can click on schools, click up high, and there's the schools that come up. Notice that the Delaware Valley. And so you can click on this, and it gives you a lot more details. Okay, So a really good way to search and see what's going on in your neck of the woods if you go to your local chapter of LEAD. Okay, so that gives you some idea. All right, so let's move on to the Living Building Challenge. And so this is a much more robust certification. So this is another certification system for buildings. Okay, so the International Living Future Institute are the people that oversee this certification process, and they have these really lofty goals. So they want to actually create a foundation for a sustainable future. They're going up beyond buildings. They really want to change the way things are done. They want to look at systemic change. They want to change the way market signals are. Change what market signals say. Kind of what we were talking about earlier with growth and development and everything. So they want to look after the safety and welfare of all beings. So this is very equitable. They want to reconcile the built environment with the natural environment. So creative biodiversity, resilience, opportunities for life. So a lot of these themes that we've been talking about and then we'll continue to talk about, they're trying to address every single one of them. And as they stated, it defines the most advanced measure of sustainability in the built environment possible today. It acts to diminish the gap between current limits and ideal solutions. So this, as you'll see, is a really robust, really thorough, totally holistic system. And there's one of their key beliefs is that all development projects should use nature as the measuring stick for performance. So I want you to press pause and think about what they mean by nature as a measuring stick. And so really what they're referring to is if you think about the way nature is, there's no waste in nature. If something, the leaves, if a tree drops its leaves and the leaves fall to the ground, that leaf is reused, it's reintegrated into the environment. Okay, everything in nature is reused at least on a long enough time scale. But by and large, living things, the biological materials on Earth, they're recycled pretty readily. And so they really want to say, like, they really want to look to nature and the way it sort of renews everything and use everything that starts out as a quote-unquote waste and puts it into a resource or converts it into a resource. They want to really use nature as their measuring stick. Okay, so this video does a pretty good job, pretty good introduction to the Living Building Challenge. So let's take a look. And that actually harkens back to really early on in the semester. He said, we have to change or the change will come to us. So if you remember the notion of resilience way back in week 2 or early on in the semester anyway, there was this belief that climate change, it's going to happen. And the fundamental question is, are we going to adjust and prepare for climate change, or are we going to be forced to change because as a result? So are we going to be sort of proactive or reactive? And he comes up with the same philosophy here. Okay, so that's a really good introduction to living buildings and some of the key concepts. And so, as he says, the Living Building Challenge asks us to imagine what if every single act of design made the world a better place. So I think that's, it's a pretty nice little synopsis. And they mention a few things in here that I want to mention. So regenerative building is a concept that not only do we want to be sustainable, but we actually want to be regenerative, so we can actually make the world a better place instead of just not harming it. I think that's actually an important distinction. The thing that we're designing things is a failure of our industry, so he's saying that, we should be designing, life basically. We want to just integrate ourselves into the natural environment. So we don't want to, like, things is kind of has this context of being something that's artificial. We want to get away from that. He talked about localizing jobs, about reducing externalities, something we've talked about in the class, and then just generally realizing that we are a part of nature. So it's a whole, the attempt here is to entirely shift our perspective, is saying from, we're people, and then over there's nature, and we need to use these buildings to separate ourselves, but they really want to shift your mentality to say, look, we are actually part of nature, and that the things we do impact nature, and the thing that nature does impacts us. And so it may sound a little bit out there, a little frou-frou, but really, if you could get people to approach life, be it in buildings or transportation or the things they do or they build or they buy, that from the perspective of, we're a part of nature, and to sort of try to, as much as possible, to not only not damage nature but to regenerate. That's really the intent of this design, and it's a big goal, but I think it's hard to argue that it wouldn't help for sustainability in a big way. And so, excuse me, they use the flower as their symbol. And I want you to press pause, and if you remember why I said they use the flower as a symbol. And basically, he said, wouldn't it be great if our buildings could capture all the solar energy and heat it in all the water that it needs in the nearby area. And so you think if we could be just as smart as a flower in our buildings, we wouldn't have to, import energy and export energy and, move all these materials around and get water from all over the place. So that's an important symbol. Okay, so there's three key tenets of the LBC. So three main sort of principles of the LBC, Living Building Challenge. You have net zero energy, which is you don't use any more energy than you generate throughout the year. Net zero water, which means you don't use any more water than you capture on your site. And no red listed products, so basically means nothing toxic in your building, nothing that's overall harmful from the environment that can't be readily reabsorbed into the environment without damaging anything. Okay, so these are three essential components of LBC. Just to take a quick step back, remember with LEED, you can choose whether or not to be energy efficient. You can choose whether or not to be water efficient. You can choose whether or not to use toxic material. So you have to do all these things with Living Building Challenge. With LEED, you could do them, but you don't necessarily have to do them. And so that's kind of the fundamental really important differentiation between LEED and living buildings, is that everything is mandatory. Okay, so the typology is just a fancy word saying like the type of structure or type of thing that you're building. Well, again, we don't want to say things, but the type of whatever it is you're building, whether it's a neighborhood or building and so forth. And so they are absolutely mandatory, so everything is mandatory. And so that's really important. So unlike LEED, you cannot pick and choose. You have to do absolutely everything that's listed as a requirement. The other thing that's really important that I actually did not mention, and I apologize for LEED, is that Living Building Challenge, the certification only happens after you've used the buildings for 12 months. With LEED, which I didn't mention, I apologize, LEED, you get LEED certification before you even move into the building. Okay, and so you think about, well, yeah, it could be a really well-designed building, but if you're not using it the right way, that can become a big problem. And again, this is not to besmirch a lead, but they, it's a good program, but it's not as holistic as Living Building Challenge. And this is a really two most important ways. You have to do everything, and in order to get Living Building certified, you need 12 months of actual use to measure to make sure that you're doing net zero energy, net zero water, and everything else. Okay? And so here are the 7 performance areas: site, water, energy, health, materials, equity, beauty. Somewhat similar to LEED, but these are the different sort of performance. And there's some more videos here as well if you want to look. So here is your matrix. So these are your typologies: neighborhood, building, landscape, renovation. So there's your petals, the site, water, energy, health, materials. And this is linked also to the Living Building website as well. You can go ahead and explore. But the point is, if I'm building a building, I have to address every single one of these things. I cannot skip a single thing. So I need limits to growth, urban agriculture, habitat exchange, carefree living, net zero water, net zero energy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like LEED where I can say, yeah, I'm going to get this one, and I'm going to get this one, I'm going to skip that, I'm going to get this, skip that. You can't do that. You have to actually achieve all of these things, and you have to demonstrate it for an entire year, okay, before you get your certification. So it's really, really robust. It's really difficult to do. There are only a small handful of buildings worldwide that have the certification, but they were not exaggerating when they say it is the most stringent sustainability certification available. There's hands down nothing even close to this. Okay, so this is it is different than LEED, and these buildings, again, really interesting buildings. This is a school in Hawaii. As you can see, it's about 5,900 square feet, and you can if you can click on this energy flow. I'll quickly click on this energy flow chart just so you can see one way that you can. Let me expand this real quick. Okay, so it's a little difficult to see, but this is kind of shows you how this is also a bioclimatic building. It utilizes the surrounding natural conditions. So you have this dominant. It's hard to read here, but it says this is the dominant winds. So they actually, you notice they actually build into the structure this little sort of wind sweep that provides circulation and provides cooling, natural cooling for the building. You have your south-facing roof that's collecting solar energy. You have a big storage tank down here, and you have these natural airflows that occur because of the way it takes advantage of the local environment. And so living buildings are pretty much almost by necessity going to be bioclimatic buildings. I mean, they're going to take advantage of the surrounding conditions and sort of working with nature as opposed to against it. Okay, and there are a few other examples if you go on their website. But the last thing I want to do, shifting gears just a little bit, is look at tiny houses. So there was a video in there about tiny houses. This is becoming a more popular choice for sustainable building, and it's sort of really shifting the paradigm a lot. I mean, a tiny house by definition is less than 500 square feet, so that's really small. Most of them are much smaller. This is probably about maybe 150 square feet. So this is smaller than what you consider a trailer. And so I want you to think about, what are the sustainability benefits of tiny homes? Is it sustainable or not? I mean, again, it's another option. This is not exactly a way to measure sustainability, but I want you to think about how this could be more sustainable because this is becoming a pretty big movement in the United States and in other parts of the world as well. And you can click on this link. There's actually an example of a really interesting equity application for this that in Dover, Delaware, near where I am. They're proposing to build a small neighborhood of tiny homes for homeless near a church, and there's some interesting issues coming up with neighbors not being happy about it and so forth. But anyway, I wanted to introduce this to you in case you haven't heard of the tiny house concept, and this again is linked to the video. But I think it's a really interesting, way to address sustainability, and it's a lot more practical. A good tiny house, maybe it's $30,000, maybe $40,000 tops, but you can make them a lot cheaper than that, as opposed to a nice regular house that's $300,000, $350,000, whatever. So it's an option that people are taking advantage of, and sort of minimizing the amount of space you have to maintain. And there are a lot of really interesting potential sustainability issues. Okay, so to kind of summarize all this, thinking about sustainability implications of sustainable buildings. in terms of the 3 E's. So I want you to think about some of the environmental implications. So you can think about the building, with LEED and living buildings in particular, the building materials, the energy use, water use, land use. So you could go into any number of environmental you could look at the emissions, climate change, and so forth. So there are certainly sustainability implications from the environmental perspective of sustainable buildings. Economic implications, so there's a few, saving money. So if I spend more money up front to build a more efficient house, maybe I'll save money in the long run. In general, I'm going to reduce the demand of natural resources, which saves more for the future, or makes them cheaper because there's less demand. Stress on the environment, if we reduce stress on the environment, then it's a little easier and cheaper for people to attain, better quality of life, which is an important part of economic sustainability. And then equity, if you think about it, there's a few things, if we're using less resources, there's more for others. By reducing demand on natural resources, on the environment, and so forth, we could possibly lower the cost of resources. And it also may, just in general, if we help sort of preserve the natural environment without damaging it by, using less damaging materials, by also just sort of changing our mentality to realize that we're part of the environment and so forth. So if we can help sort of preserve the natural environment the way it is, then it may be more accessible for others. Okay? All right, so that concludes the sustainable buildings lesson.